James Gallagher amazing? I can tell you this, there is no way I'd be here today if it weren't for James Gallagher. I could not ask for a better, I like the term partner in liberty. Can I steal that? Couldn't ask for a better partner in liberty. And the North State couldn't ask for a better representative than James Gallagher. Thank you to Orrin and Mike and all of the leaders who have devoted every fiber of your being to giving our state this chance at a better future. Thank you to Matt and Erica and Jonathan for your advocacy. And thank you to Tamika, who is going to be an amazing congresswoman. And thank all of you for being part of the fight. I cannot tell you how energizing it is to be with you here today and to get the chance to talk with you. And it's really what gives me the energy and the drive to keep up the fight. I join you today not so much as a candidate for political office, but as one participant in a historic movement. And I mean historic in every sense. It's a movement that is rooted in our history, in what John F. Kennedy called the revolutionary belief for which our forebears fought, that the rights of man come not from the generosity of the state, but from the hand of God. It's a movement that has made history, bringing together millions of Californians from all walks of life, all backgrounds, all political views, who in the throes of despair and division found hope and common cause. And it is a movement that will change history, reminding the whole world that even facing the longest of odds, the most daunting of obstacles, a free people always has the power to make tomorrow better than today. This last weekend, we celebrated America's independence. And we remembered the immortal words with which it was declared. We know these words so well, the stirring lines, the self-evident truths, that it's easy to forget what the rest of the Declaration was. A long list of grievances against a single man. Yes, and I swear Gallagher and I didn't coordinate on this. Our founders understood they had to make the case against King George. But the revolution was about more than him. It was based on universal principles. Principles that would set the colonies on a new course. Principles to forge a distinctly American identity. That's why 77 years later, Abraham Lincoln would say the nation was conceived not in hostility, but in liberty. Now we too have made our case against a single man. Our list of grievances against Governor Gavin Newsom is long, tragic, devastating, infuriating, without comparison in our state's past or our nation's present. But the recall is about more than him. It too is based on universal principles. Principles that will set our state on a new course. Principles to perfect the American identity in our distinctly Californian way. That's why, as the years go by, this governor may fade from memory. But the recall he inspired will always be remembered as a new birth of freedom for the state of California. Now I'll confess that my presence here today is unlikely. Some may call this campaign too bold. At 36, I'd be the nation's youngest governor. And by population, I'd be leading its biggest state. But you know, as it happens, the guy who's currently the nation's youngest governor also leads one of the biggest states. And I'd say Governor Ron DeSantis is doing a pretty darn good job. politics gets smaller every year, where lawmakers have ambitions no loftier than a steady per diem, where complacency reigns amidst the most obvious signs of failure. In that capital, if boldness is a crime, then I'm guilty as charged. Besides, I'm standing on the shoulders of 2.1 million giants. One signature at a time, the people of California ignited this movement, lit this fire. I am humbled to be but one bearer of the torch. Now, I'll tell you this, the naysaying does have a familiar ring. 6 years ago, I first ran for the legislature in a crowded field of 11 candidates, 8 of them Republicans. I had taught high school in inner city LA. I'd prosecuted violent felons. I defended our Constitution in California courts, but I'd never run for anything. I was an outsider seeking entry into a capital that only welcomes insiders. The rude people simply laughed or scoffed. The nicer people would try to say polite things like, oh, maybe this will help you get your name out there. And I would respond just as politely that actually I'm planning to win. And that's what we did. Special interest billionaires and self-funders spent huge sums of money. But we had an army of volunteers in a grassroots campaign like California had never seen. We shocked the political establishment, and we've been shaking it ever since. Now, I've been called a maverick, leader of the opposition, Gavin Newsom's chief antagonist. But at the same time, I've authored some of the most groundbreaking legislation passed in recent years on issues like freedom of speech, public safety, school choice, criminal justice reform, artificial intelligence. I've actually co-authored hundreds of successful bipartisan bills and resolutions. And last year, I was re-elected with over 178,000 votes, the most ever in California history for a member of my party. Yet every effort that I have made, or that James Gallagher has made, to take on our state's core problems has been snuffed out. That's because we have a political system, a state government that is fundamentally broken. When you pay the highest gas taxes while driving over the deepest potholes, your government is broken. When you pay for billions more in homelessness spending, yet watch tent encampments multiply, your government is broken. When your child's education is funded at up to $26,000 per year, yet she still isn't taught to read, your government is broken. When you get a good job and work hard, yet can't afford a down payment on a house until your 40s, your government is broken. When you live in fear of your community burning down and uncertainty over your light switch working, your government is broken. When you're told to take a shorter shower while water flows abundantly to the ocean, your government is broken. When you watch calculator-wielding thieves rob department stores in broad daylight, waving at the security camera on the way out, your government is broken. When you walk down public streets that function as both restrooms and injection sites, your government is broken. When you wait hours in line for a driver's license while state politicians get their own private DMV, your government is broken. Everywhere you look, it is the same story. As Californians, we sacrifice the most and we get the least in return. It's no wonder 2/3 of residents say they think their kids living in our state today will be worse off than their parents. And it's no wonder so many people are packing up U-Hauls to avoid this fate. Last year, for the first time in California's 170-year history, our population declined. This used to be the state where anyone could get ahead, where the full glory of the American dream was realized. It's now the state that many can't wait to leave behind. That is the California tragedy. So how did this happen? With our extraordinary wealth in companies and universities, our astounding diversity of people, communities, and cultures, our beautiful mountains and lakes and trails, our magnificent coast and enviable weather, with Silicon Valley and Hollywood, avocados and almonds, a mystique that lights up eyes the world over, not to mention an outsized influence in Washington, D.C. With all of these assets, how are we last in everything? Well, across the world and throughout history, one factor more than any other separates failing states from prosperous ones, and that is political corruption. Nothing is more ruinous. It is an iron law of the human condition that corruption leads to decay. California is the furthest thing from a government of, by, and for the people. It is a government of corrupt politicians controlled by lobbyists for the benefit of special interests. And no one has personified that corruption like Gavin Newsom. As long as dictionaries are printed, the first entry under hypocrisy will always be the French Laundry. But what was even more revealing about that scandal was the company our governor keeps, a table full of lobbyists. They wine him, they dine him, they elect him, they own him. And as my partner in Liberty said, they've helped him raise $30 million for this recall alone. When buying politicians is your business model, you will pay anything to stop a citizens' movement. PG&E, to take one example, was behind Gavin Newsom's rise to power in San Francisco. To this day, PG&E has given more money to Gavin Newsom than any other politician. They even pay his wife's salary. To take another example, it was Newsom's largest funders, massive unions, that instructed him to sign and ruthlessly enforce AB 5. Then during COVID-19, Newsom took this corruption to peak levels with a penchant for turning emergency powers into cash. That might be why he refuses to give them up. Huge no-bid contracts were awarded to the governor's top donors. Powerful interests, including Hollywood, were exempted from lockdowns as small businesses died in droves. But worst of all, in what may go down as the political crime of the century, this governor expelled millions of kids from school, longer than any state, while his own kids attended in-person private school. He inflicted untold harm on a generation of young people. He reduced your child's life expectancy so he could keep getting money from teachers' unions, perhaps for a delusional presidential run. If this isn't grounds for removal, I don't know what is. Time and again, my friends, the Newsom regime has proven the truth of that famous saying: power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Corruption was already causing California's decline, but Newsom's absolute corruption has brought the decline to a total freefall. California has had the worst COVID experience of any state. If our outcomes matched Florida's, millions more kids would have been in school, hundreds of thousands more workers would be employed, and thousands more people would be alive. Proverbs tells us, where there is no vision, the people perish. In Gavin Newsom's California, there has been no vision. But it's not because he's blind. This governor drove our state off a cliff with eyes wide open. The recall, then, is about one thing, and it's about everything. Rooting out political corruption and restoring good government. More than any particular policy, it offers a new paradigm for our public life, based on integrity and service. That's how we'll fix all the failed policies. To save the state we love. If you don't like the result, you can vote for a return to political racketeering next year. In this historic election, we can not only correct the unprecedented abuses of the COVID era, but turn the page on the long-standing abuses that got us to this point. We can turn the page on our state's disregard for the well-being of students by empowering families with school choice. We can turn the page on our state's disrespect for the welfare of workers by removing barriers to opportunity and protecting the right to earn a living. We can turn the page on the California exodus by rolling back every special interest giveaway that makes it so expensive for ordinary people to live here. And we can turn the page on this dark era of government control by lighting a new spark of liberty and self-government. Self-government. This is the moment to rekindle that great American innovation, to renew the meaning of we the people. Here's the thing. I think the most important job of our next governor is to make it less important who the governor is, by returning powers to local communities and individual citizens. Less power in the governor's hands means more power in your hands to live your life as you see fit and to have your say in our shared future. That's the larger promise of this recall, revitalizing the whole idea of citizenship, reviving those forgotten words from our Declaration of Independence, the consent of the governed. At the end of the day, this is a movement not just to fire America's worst governor. This is a movement to save America's greatest state. We've already made history. We've already made history, and now comes the fight for California's future. I happen to believe California is worth fighting for. I know all of you do as well. And it's an honor to be in that fight with you. Thank you very much.